It's DuEwa Frazier here, and I'm back for the episode 2 of Afrofutures Pod, and I have a special guest with me tonight. But first, before I bring her on, I want to introduce my new book, which my guest is in this book, and it's Introduction to Afrofuturism, a mixtape in Black literature and arts that was released in August from the academic publisher Routledge. So I'm very proud and pleased to be the editor of this volume and to introduce Dr. Christian Hines, who's going to join us momentarily. Let me go ahead and bring our guest in, as I also want to make sure that the invite is done properly. Here we go. As I also Dr. Christian M. Hines is an assistant professor of reading and literacy at Texas State University. She is a former high school English teacher and Blerd, that stands for Black Nerd, and teacher educator whose work centers on the use of diverse young adult literature and multimodal texts in secondary classrooms. She leans into comics and graphic novels, specifically diverse teen superhero narratives, as a way for students and practitioners to understand the intersectional lived experiences of youth and the impact that youth has on society and enacting resistance. I'm very happy to bring in Dr. Christian M. Hines, and let's go live with Dr. Hines right now. And thank you all if you're joining me for Afrofutures Pod tonight. And we'll bring in Dr. Hines. And Dr. Hines, if you're on, I think you just have to accept the invite that I just sent you so that you can fully be in the live with us. And while we're waiting on Dr. Hines, go ahead and adjust my camera. Make sure we're in full view here for the discussion. See. And if you're just joining me, I'm DuEwa Frazier, or in academic circles, Dr. DuEwa Frazier. And I'm pleased to present this podcast, this digital podcast, that is really showcasing scholars and writers, creatives, poets who we'll be talking to in the near future, who are in this book, Introduction to Afrofuturism, but who are also doing other great things and in other publications. But we want to definitely shine a light on the wonderful work that they're doing. So I have invited Dr. Hines to come in a few times. It could just be something slow with the Instagram platform. So Dr. Hines, okay, she's coming on.
Look,
There we go.
I was on my iPad, like everything was acting up, so I'm like, I guess I just have to get on my phone.
Yeah, most people, it doesn't work when you're using other, stuff. But you're here now. Hey.
Yes, my apologies for being late. It was technical. I kept trying to get through, and I'm like,
no worries at all. It is Sunday, and we are going to be stress-free, easy breezy.
yeah.
And so, Dr. Hines, thank you so much for joining me. This is episode 2 of Afrofutures Pod, and I'm very pleased and inspired to have you as my guest to talk about your wonderful chapter, Young, Gifted, and Black, exploring the community building of science and sisterhood in Marvel's Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. And how appropriate, because they have just announced there's going to be a Black Panther 3 featuring Denzel. Go Denzel, go Denzel. So yeah, we're happy about that. So that lets us know Black Panther is not forgotten. They're still trying to, work that whole franchise.
They are. they even have an animated series coming out at the end of next year on Disney Plus called like Eyes of Wakanda. So they're really
Oh
still
wow,
trying to do it in and plug it in, which I'm excited about to bring new people in outside of the comics. So I hope they keep the franchise going.
totally.
Yes. But no, I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Dr. Frazier, number one, for letting me contribute to this book. It was such an amazing experience, and to read everybody's pieces. This is the L, and I have it here to average. So make sure you all go pick up this book. We
Hey.
have it. We finally got it in the mail. We got our physical copy. So excited to have this in my hands.
Yes.
And so excited to be a part of it.
Awesome. You're so welcome.
Okay, so you want me to just jump right in, or?
Yeah, this is your platform to, discuss your work, and, also we're just wanting to shine a light on your beautiful chapter, for those who are following and those who may be listening later on the replay. So yeah, wherever you want to jump in on your, your focus and your research and what you found and what you think is interesting, and whatever you got, we want it.
So I'll start from the beginning. So we were already talking about Black Panther, the franchise.
Yes.
So I'm a big comics nerd. I'm a Blerd, like you said, a Black nerd. I've always read like comics, especially like Black superheroes, and Black superheroes for me is an epitome of like Afrofuturism, because we're thinking of ourselves saving the day and things like that.
Right.
So when I initially saw the call for the Afrofuturism book, the first thing that always comes to mind to me, even though Afrofuturism has been around for decades, I always think of Wakanda. I always think about the technological advances. And the first thing that comes to mind is Womack's work. Yes, Wakanda Forever. I would do it for, and I even have even Ironheart, which I'm gonna talk
Oh,
about later. I even have my
I love
Ironheart shirt
that.
on,
Yes.
representing because she is a part of Afrofuturism. But I think about Womack's phrase in her book where she talks about Afrofuturism kind of being an intersection between imagination, technology, and the future. And thinking about Wakanda and all the technological advances that come there, and also with my background as a public school educator, when talking to my students about Afrofuturism, the first thing they think is now is Black Panther, after the initial 2018 movie, which
Right.
was such a phenomenon. Everyone loved it. We love Chadwick Boseman and the work that he did there. But even the comics, the people who wrote the comics, like Ta-Nehisi Coates, Christopher Priest, even Evel Ewing, who is
Sure.
also a
Eve Ewing,
professor.
right.
Yes, I loved her work. So thinking about the things that they did with Black Panther and the things that we did with Wakanda, and how Black Panther himself is Marvel's first Black superhero in comics. But for cinematic versions, Blade was the first Black one, but Wakanda, Black Panther is the most notable one, because a lot of people don't remember Wesley Snipes' Blade, even though they should go watch
Right.
it. So thinking about Wakanda, Afrofuturism, and the Black Panther franchise, Wakanda itself is this uncolonized, liberated utopia that was made for Black people. It's in Africa. They have their own community. They have their own hidden spaces. They have their own heroes. Black Panther interacts outside of Africa, but they really have this safe space for them, and they're really so advanced with their technology because of the vibranium. So they're immersed in this techno culture from this herb that came from outer space. And so when I started thinking about Afrofuturism, especially with Chadwick Boseman, it was right around the time when Wakanda Forever came out, and I was curious as to, after his untimely death, what was going to happen with the franchise. How were they going to change the narrative? How were they going to focus on the story? And then looking at a couple of interviews from Ryan Coogler, when the initial story was going to be about Black Panther and his son, so it was going to be a father-son narrative, but they switched it over because of his death, and it became a mother-daughter narrative. So thinking about the shift in narrative from thinking about inheritance to legacy, to when we think about motherhood, girlhood, and issues of like grief, inheritance, and perseverance. So how that shift in narrative changed the overall story for Black Panther. And so when I'm thinking about how Afrofuturism, especially as a Black woman, is used to restore heroism, Wakanda Forever was my entry point for this collection, because of, first of all, the main characters, Shuri and Riri. These are two Black girls, and their heroism comes from their intellect. So them being these Black girls in STEM, them being able to create these type of machines, these type of things, and not just for like fame. They create things to help their community. So once again, going back to looking at that technology, looking at that imagination, but also looking at liberation, because for them, this technology is a way to give back. So thinking about the different ways that girlhood, especially Black girls in STEM, sisterhood, motherhood, and the different dynamics and different relationships that are portrayed in this movie, and how those dynamics play out, like the relationships between Shuri and Queen Ramonda, Shuri and Okoye, and then Shuri and Riri, and even the brief conversations between like
Sure.
Shuri and Nakia. So having these focal points of women, and these very brilliant, very smart women, and these women in technology, and
Mhm.
how we have these different nuanced portrayals of Black women in this film. So I used it, the framework that I used for this chapter, to kind of look at the film, number one, as a film of liberation, but also looking at a critique of the film, because there are different social injustices, because this is a narrative that is focused on Black people, that is about Black people with Black writers, but also there are still some traumatic things that happen. So even when we have these waves of liberation, there are still certain things that we have to go through.
Sure.
So I looked at Ebony Elizabeth Thomas's her framework, which is called the Dark Fantastic, and I
Mhm.
use that kind of as a framework to critique the different cycles that happen within this film, and looking at how we explore Black girlhood in this film. So she has like these 5 cycles of the Dark Fantastic, and what her framework does is that it looks at how Black bodies are positioned in different stories and
Yeah.
different fandoms, and she talks about specifically Black girls in stories, how Black girls deserve more and things of that nature. So her fantastic cycle, which looks at it has 5 different levels. It's a spectacle, a hesitation, a violence, a haunting, and an emancipation. So
Sure.
looking at how this cycle goes through the Wakanda Forever movie, and how Shuri and Riri encompass different forms of these cycles. So looking at how the issues are created, how they are addressed, how we reflect on it, how the characters reflect on it, how different issues are dismantled, and how they move towards liberation. So particularly for this movie, thinking of different scenes that go through each one of the cycles of the Dark Fantastic, and looking
Yeah.
at the restoring. So first thinking about Shuri and Riri, once again going back to them being examples of Afrofuturism, because they're scientists, they're both engineers, and they're both young women. So them kind of disrupting the narrative of Black girls being in STEM. So they're in these spaces where they're trying to make a difference, and then thinking about the issues that come up, because the characters in the movie, when the movie first opens
Yeah.
up, they're dealing with the grief of Black Panther, him passing away, and what happens after that. So we have this issue of grief between Ramonda and Shuri, but they don't really get a time to grieve, because then the issue that comes up is when Namor comes, and there's an issue with vibranium being exposed to the world. So now they have to deal with it. So how do we look at dealing with grief? How do we look at moving towards the future? But how do we do that while simultaneously having to deal with issues that are surrounding our people in our country, that no longer has a leader? And Shuri isn't ready to step
And
up to that, because she's
so,
more. Oh,
quick
sorry, go ahead.
question, Dr. Hines. And so, in thinking about, I noticed when you mentioned Riri, in your chapter, in the beginning of the chapter, Riri is also Riri Williams. Would that also be Riri Williams as Ironheart? Can you kind of go back to the premise of Black women in superhero comics, kind of giving that foundation? Um, and you mentioned transmedia, which a lot of us may not know what that means.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was so fixated on what about people who may not know the history, like going back even before Black Panther, with Black women in superhero comics, and like how that kind of sets the stage for some of the, you mentioned Kamala Khan as Miss Marvel and Riri Williams as Ironheart. Like, these are things I didn't have a previous knowledge of myself. And so you're really unpacking this for us. Can you kind of go back to discuss that as well?
So Riri Williams was created in 2014. She was created by Brian Michael Bendis. She was created to at first kind of be a substitute for Iron Man. So she is this 15-year-old super genius from Chicago who recreated an Iron Man suit in her own garage based off of
Wow.
different scrap parts that she found from Chicago. And then Tony Stark found out about her because of some of the things she, like her suit, she engineered it, it could fly, she's making rockets, she's saving the day, she's soaring. People are like snapping YouTube videos of her.
Right.
And so because of her genius, she gets recruited to MIT at the age of 15. Now they aged her up for the movie. She was 19 in the movie, but the original comic, she was 15
Oh,
years old. And
wow.
then going back to where you were talking about Black women in comics. So I focus on Riri because Black women in comics typically tend to be older. Like my
Yes.
favorite, of course, is Storm. A lot of people know Storm from the
Right.
X-Men as like and she is like one of the original Black superheroes. But we also have Misty Knight, who was a detective. We also have Monica Rambeau, who was Photon and
Oh,
Captain
wow.
Marvel. So we have a lot of, and we have Bumblebee in DC. Like there are a ton of Black women superheroes, and being able to, but they were created like around the late 70s, and they're starting to be created more now. They're starting to be explored more now, I guess I should say. So thinking about Black women as superheroes and Black women saving the day, and most of the Black women who are comic superheroes, they're regular everyday women, with the exception of like Storm because she's a goddess. But Misty Knight got her powers because of technology. Bumblebee, the same thing. Ironheart, even Shuri becomes Black Panther for a while. In the
Yeah.
comics, she takes the herb and she takes over the mantle. So we have these not only Black women, we have these young Black women. Or my favorite, which I do want to plug, I don't know if you heard of Moon Girl, Lunella Lafayette
Uh-huh.
is another Black girl superhero. She was recently created in 2015. She had her own comics run. She has a Disney Plus TV series that's out. But she is another Black girl engineer scientist, and she has this big red dinosaur. And she's in New York saving the day, creating inventions and doing things of that nature. So for me, it's looking at the younger Black heroes now, because they're starting to be created more and replicated more. And that brings us to the transmedia. So transmedia is just how one narrative can be illustrated across multiple platforms. So they
Okay.
start as comics, and then we go into seeing that story as a movie, or for like Disney Plus, we go into seeing them as TV shows and cartoon series, because even Ironheart and Shuri have a Marvel movie, and it's an
Yes.
animated movie. So we're looking at these stories showing up on different platforms, or even when they make small like web shorts and things of that nature. So looking at how stories come across on different platforms is what we're looking at, what I'm looking at when I'm talking about transmedia. So making those connections of a single story across multiple platforms.
Got you. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that so much. I have another question. Do you think, as a scholar and someone who certainly, as you mentioned, um, even a film critic, do you kind of feel like you're kind of a film critic too, like in this genre? Um, I,
I don't know if don't necessarily say critic, because I don't know if I have all the film credentials. I do like to, because we're all scholars,
right,
like I do like to critique and investigate. And I think that's just like how my mind works. Like I'll watch a movie, and at the same time I'm like, oh, this is happening, or I can see the breakdown, or I can see this correlation
right,
to the real world. So I remember watching this movie in the theater, and there were so many things that were going through my mind. And because I came in as a fan of Riri, because I had been doing work on her for a while, looking at her representation as comic. So I was very excited when they put her in the
yeah,
movie. So I went in already wanting to see how her story was going to translate to the big screen. So I think in that area, yes, I do like to critique and analyze the films, but I think it's just something I do for fun, even with like cartoons and things of that nature.
totally. And something I really also appreciate about your chapter, Dr. Hines, is your focus on how Shuri was so technologically like innovative and savvy. In this movie, in this film, it's like we know about this makes me think about Black Girls Code, which is, an organization that's been around for some years, really hooking Black girls into coding and into areas of technology that Normally, you know, black and brown girls or black and brown youth are not supported
Yep.
to become experts in. And here we have a character in a sci-fi film, a black female character who is really a leader in that regard. So I wondered if you could talk about that, the depiction of her being really like the general, the leader, the facilitator of the technological framework that was in Wakanda.
Yes, so absolutely. I love it because she's over the Wakanda design group, which she does also in the comics as well. And she is their leading technologist in the country. I love that they planted the breadcrumb for that at the end of the first movie when he took her to LA and he told her, you're going to be over the science, information, and technology portion of this outreach program. So they started the seed for that at the end of the first
Right.
movie. And then we come into the second movie and you see her lab has expanded. She had people in it in the first one, but now there are multiple levels. She created her own AI. So once again, like you said, going back to that coding, looking at her innovation to have this AI that is tailored to her country, to the point where the AI is like her friend. Like he's trying to tell her, hey, your mom's coming, you might want to get it together. And she's like brushing him off. And even thinking about the scientists that are in the Wakanda design group, how they lean into her, how she took the vibranium, things that she learned from her brother, because T'Challa himself was a scientist before he became a hero. And she took the knowledge that she learned from him and expanded it and developed things that would help her country even more, like even making borders, things of that nature, how they clean the food, even bringing somebody back to life in the first movie when she saved that guy when he got shot in his back. So being able to help him, and like he's like, it's magic, and she's like, no, it's not magic, it's technology. But that
It's
technology
technology.
came from her and developed, like they developed a whole underground railroad system from that technology. So I think
Yes.
that that is a beautiful depiction of the possibilities for girls, black and brown girls, or girls in STEM, being able to see that and know that that's what they can do. My niece is a scientist. She's in 10th grade. So we're talking
Oh,
about that
wow.
with her. And I was sending her comics and I'm like, look at this, like these are things you can do. So even knowing like black girls who are interested in science, technology, math, and being able to
Mhm.
show them these depictions. And the same thing with Lunella, like if I was to write another chapter, it would be about her because she's 9 years old. So she's in middle school
Oh,
developing
wow.
the advanced technology. She built a lab under her middle school on her own with resources from her community. So also thinking about the things that are available to people who want to be in STEM, to girls that want to be in STEM, because Lunella and Riri, they differ from Shuri because Shuri had the access to the technology. Riri and Lunella pulled things from their community, but they already had the ingenuity to transform
Yeah.
it into something different.
You know, and it makes me think about, I forget the plant, the scene with the plant. Do you remember that? It's almost like where, you know, you get buried and then you go back to the
Yes.
ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
It also makes me think about what this film was showing us through these characters and through these women is almost like technology used for healing arts. Like we would normally think of it as, okay, they're doing herbalism, you know, they're doing holistic healing, but it's actually technology, as you mentioned. So what do you think about that intersection between healing, you know, a depiction of almost like African healing, holistic healing arts, and times, you know, the X uh, technology?
So I love that. I touched on that a little bit in the chapter, thinking about, like you said, combining the technology and the spirituality, because Shuri herself is very much a technical girl. She says it all the time. She doesn't really believe in the spirit. Like she even recreated the herb with her technology, but she still crossed the bridge of still having to go to that spiritual realm, even for her technology to properly work, because without that herb, which in itself had spiritual powers, she was not able to recreate it until she had a piece of that plant back. So thinking about when they're on the astral plane, and even she recreated the herb and she recreated it to her specificity.
Hmm.
When she's in that spiritual plane, she's still in control. She's still not believing it. In her mind, she's like, my technology brought me here. I know the herb brought me here, but we're going to move
Yeah.
from that because my technology is still keeping us here. And I
Yes.
think another way that they also combined it, which I thought was really cool, if you remember the scene when she came down, when they were having the meeting with M'Baku, and when they said the Black Panther lives again, but all the elders came and they placed their hands on her,
Hmm.
like they were praying for her and blessing
Sure.
her, but they're still putting it on the Black Panther suit that she made with the nanite. So we still have that intersection of, we have the spiritual, they're blessing her, but
Right,
they're really
because
blessing her
that's
technology
that's
that she
something we
made.
know about in our community, the laying
Mhm.
on of
Yep.
hands.
Yep.
That is something time throughout, generations is what, as they say, the elders in the church or in some kind of healing circle. The
Yep.
hands are known to, bring that healing and that empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a culmination of that in that scene. And when, even when she had to lay down to get the herb, and she's telling Nakia, like, she has herb, but she was like, y'all have to stay here in case I go into cardiac arrest, because she wasn't waiting for the spiritual part. She was still leaning into it until
Right,
the end when she was able to see her mom. And then that was a piece of her that finally combined her technology with her
right,
spirituality that she
right.
wasn't even aware that she had in her. Hmm.
Right, for sure. And so, Dr. Hines, would you privilege us with, honor us rather with an excerpt reading of your chapter, whatever you want to, kind of
Sure.
share with us and give the folks a little sample here?
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna read from this section, seeing ourselves, like towards the end of the chapter.
Okay.
Um, it's on, if you have it's on page 89.
Yeah,
Oh,
at
yeah.
89, yeah, I got it.
All
Thank you.
right. Okay. So Shuri and Riri as characters embody Afrofuturism as they are constructions of liberating images for Black girls. Shuri and Riri create avenues to envision the Black girls in the fantastic as scientists, warriors, sisters, and daughters. The portrayal of two brilliant young women whose ultimate superpowers lie in their ability to not only imagine new futures, but to create them with their intellect and advanced technology to enhance the lives of those around them. And that can have lasting impacts on the people consuming these images. Shuri and Riri are representative of Black girls from two different backgrounds who found a common ground in their circumstances and in each other. Shuri's initial goal was to protect Riri, but even from the onset, she admired her brilliance and ingenuity in crafting the vibranium detector, fighting Namor, her love of her family, and engineering. Shuri and Riri craft a tale of Black girls reimagining and reconstructing the worlds they exist in beyond the oppressive systems that would seek to bring them down. Whenever they were faced with obstacles, they found a way to overcome it together. Their technology would be nothing without their ingenuity behind it. In a society where the marginalization of women, particularly Black women, is continuous, Afrofuturism and the dark fantastic acknowledges the need to amplify and critique the representation and agency of the Black woman, which includes addressing the very intersectionalities that come along with being a Black woman and a Black girl.
That's beautiful. And I love how you tie that all together and give it, you you're in the film and then you come away from the film to really give it a more humanistic analysis of, this is what this symbology, this is what this represents for Black girls, period. um, and have you found that there have been other film projects, whether television, streaming, or the big screen, that have been similar? Have you noticed any since Black Panther? In other words, Black Panther serving as a model, maybe now showing that, hey, script writers, screenwriters, producers, directors, this is a thing that people want to see more depictions of Black and brown girls living possibilities, infinite possibilities rather than limitations. What do you think about that?
Yes, I've seen some before and post. Before Black Lightning, the CW TV series,
Oh
his daughter
yeah, I remember
Thunder and
Black Lightning,
Lightning.
right.
Yes, I, I think his daughters Thunder and Lightning have provided good examples of, once again, the Afrofuturism, the Black women as superheroes, and also Black women from the community being superheroes. And then I think with the 2018, the first Black Panther, it was because of Shuri's portrayal in there that Marvel gave her a solo comics run, and they also
Yeah.
gave her a comic run written by a Black woman. So once again, being able to have that transmediated story, so the people who saw her on screen can now see her in a solo run because she would show up in Black Panther comics, but now she has her own.
Sure.
But also, Ava DuVernay she got to do Naomi for the CW,
Oh yes.
another Black girl
And did
superhero in the
that come from
community.
a comic?
Yes.
Did that come? Was that big? I thought so. Right. Okay.
Yes.
Hmm.
So that was another one that had a comic. Then we also, I think it paved the way for Moon Girl to be able to be taken out of the comics, and then her having her own Disney Plus show and them expanding her story. And then of course
Right.
the Ironheart series comes out summer of 2025. So Riri's story gets to be continued on the small screen. Or even Monica Rambeau. So looking at her in WandaVision, or looking at her in the Marvels, having another Black scientist, Black woman who is a superhero. So I think it did open the door and pave a way for Marvel to see that, yes, this is something we should invest in. These are more replications. And even DC, like I said, DC has Black Lightning, they have Naomi.
Yeah.
So we have these big publishers, big two comic publishers, who are now looking to put more of this representation. So yeah, I think it definitely helped open the doors for more of that.
Totally. That's amazing. And Dr. Hines, this research, like I received your submission probably, almost a year ago now, maybe, right? At least several months ago. So I'm sure you've been working on other things. Is there anything related or similar that you care to share that you are excited about that may be forthcoming or that you're working on?
So I do. So you're actually going to be the first person to actually hear this.
Hey.
So I am excited. I just got contracted to write a book about Moon Girl
Hey.
and Devil Dinosaur.
Yay!
So that
This is
I
an
am,
Afrofutures pod exclusive.
yes, you're the first. You are the. I have look. I haven't even, and one of my friends is on this line. I haven't even told my friends yet. So,
Oh, that's
but they're-
that's amazing.
I was going to
Congratulations,
tell
Dr.
them.
Hines.
So yes,
Okay, so
I
you'll have to
am.
come back and let me interview you on Nerdosity when you have your book.
Okay,
That's my other
absolutely.
podcast where I interview authors and poets, people that are doing cool stuff, but in the vein of scribing and then producing it and all that. So I love to talk to you when that comes to fruition.
Absolutely. I would love to be back. I have enjoyed this conversation and I enjoy working with you.
Yay! Okay, well, Dr. Hines, please tell the audience where you can be found, how we can follow you and fan you, and all those things.
You can find me, of course, on Instagram. My regular Instagram, of course, is Hines Solo. My academic Instagram is called Tales from the Dark Side, and tales like story tales, not a telltale.
Right, right,
Or
right.
you can always shoot me an email. I'm at Texas State University. You can look me up. Feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to talk nerd stuff, academic stuff, anything. I'll go off on a tangent. So you can find me on socials, or you can find me through my email, and I'm always happy to chat anything nerd related.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hines. This has been a pleasure to speak with you. I'm so happy to be in network with you and again have you in this book that we're in. So please do hopefully stay in touch, and we love to follow and see more of what you're doing with your scholarship and writing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. I appreciate the time.
Okay, have a good night.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye. And I was just speaking with Dr. Christian M. Hines, and you can check out her chapter on the women of Wakanda in the Black Panther film, Introduction to Afrofuturism, a mixtape in Black literature and arts, out now by Routledge. And I am DuEwa Frazier, the host and producer of Afrofutures Pod here at Afrofuturism Book on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining me. And stay tuned for future authors, poets, and writers who we will have on this podcast, and hope you'll definitely follow this Instagram and stay tuned for what we have for you. Thanks so much and have a good night.